Critics and reviewers and journalists and moviegoers have gone to great lengths to avoid revealing the stunning twist that has everyone talking about The Crying Game. But there's more to the film than that. Neil Jordan's intriguing work deals with love and war and race and identity in this tale of an IRA terrorist encounter with a black British soldier. Joining me now to talk about it is screenwriter and director Neil Jordan, who is best known for his Golden Globe award-winning film Mona Lisa. Also actor Stephen Rea, who plays IRA man Fergus in The Crying Game, is currently starring in Someone to Watch Over Me on Broadway, and actress Miranda Richardson, who plays Rea's fellow terrorist and girlfriend Jude. She's also receiving acclaim for her roles in, count them, 3 films, Enchanted April and Damage and Crying Game. Welcome. Pleasure. This has been one incredible year for you, hasn't it?
It's good. Yeah. It's good. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. And you didn't know when you cast her that she'd be coming up with all these winners at the time.
I knew she would.
You did. You figured that out.
I did. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah.
Tell me about, what is your guess as to why this has created such a sensation? Another story in the New York Times.
I can only guess. I really, because maybe films have become so kind of cripplingly bland over the last 2 years. You know, they've kind of boxed themselves into the most dreadful corner of all, which is utter predictability and boredom. You know, I mean, we made this film really just because we wanted to make it. We didn't anticipate any huge response to it. I mean, I made it with an audience in mind. I spoke to Stephen and Miranda about it before I was writing it, and you know, everybody really made it as a labor of love, really. But we knew we could get no backing for it because the kind of subject matter this film deals with has been squeezed out of the system, really. And
the subject matter is what? In your, I mean, how would you characterize the subject matter that's been squeezed out of the system? What is it? Terrorism? The conflict in Ira?
No. It's just real life, pure and simple. Yeah. What happens around you, pure and simple. I mean, the Hollywood system has squeezed every facet of what actually is happening on the streets in the world from its movies. You know,
the idea was percolating in your head for some time.
Yeah, for quite a while.
And the basic notion was that you wanted to make a film about an IRA terrorist.
No, I basically wanted to make a film about an IRA terrorist played by Stephen. Yeah. The first movie we did was called Angel. Yeah. And I wanted to make a film about the kidnapping by this gentleman of a black British soldier, and then the obsession that develops between himself and the soldier's lover. And that triangular obsession is both about man, about woman, about race, about politics, about a lot of different things. Yeah.
Stephen, what attracted you to this film other than Neil and the character that you played? Because you have said that Fergus, it wasn't a lot of study for you. You knew this man, you understood him.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say that to work with Neil was a very big incentive, you know, because he's got a very particular imagination, and you know, just to hear him talk about his attitude to film, you know, as opposed to the normal films that are being made, you know, he's somebody that you got to work with. I was interested in doing something about a guy from Ireland in a difficult political situation who maybe has to come to terms with that and to look into himself and try and find other ways of being, other ways of responding to the war situation that he's in. That interested me as well.
Yeah. Miranda?
I wanted to work with Neil because he has a very particular vision. I've enjoyed his other work. I think it's an advantage to have a director who is also the writer, who knows what he wants, because I think then there's a shorthand perhaps between him and the actor, and it's a completely original story, and as a tribute to him, I mean, even though I knew the story, when I saw the finished product, I was completely taken aback by it.
That brings me to an interesting point. I feel the same way. I knew the story as well when I saw the film.
Well, it's the oldest story in the world, isn't it?
Yeah.
But every good story is, really.
Yeah, that's right. And it didn't detract a second from me. I mean, I know that you feel very strongly that the twist that the film takes.
No, I don't. I don't feel it's a big deal, that twist. Yeah. You know, I don't want.
Well, somebody does, because you're.
Well, somebody does. I know. Well, the entire world does at the moment, actually. But it's not. I mean, it's not a gimmick. It's not something that I want to obscure the movie, because the movie is not about that.
Of course, it's not.
That is integral to all the
and
different
not
shades
even
of
if you knew it, it doesn't ruin the attraction.
No, in some
of the
ways,
film.
if you do know, it makes it more interesting.
Yeah,
in a way, because
you pick up on.
Or if you see it the second time.
The second time, yeah. It's all right to know it the second time.
But there is
it's only fair to let you see it.
Okay, then we'll tell what the twist is.
Well, the twist is that he's actually British. That's the twist.
No. But those people who say, well, boy, you've sure got a ride because it was a gimmick and because it, in a sense, it enables you to attract attention to the film.
First of all, when I wrote the script, sent it around to people, they said, okay, no way are we making this movie. You're never going to be able to get this movie made.
Because?
because it dealt with race, it dealt with terrorism, it dealt with sexuality, it dealt with a lot of provocative issues that are all thrown together in the one kind of potpourri. Any one of these issues would have been enough to make people turn it down.
To characterize what Fergus goes through sexually, what's happening in this relationship, what's that could attract all of us in understanding? I mean, he is a man that comes to what conclusion and has changed how?
Well, we're now centering on the very thing that we're
trying to avoid talking.
Yeah.
But okay, but there is something here about what? What does it say about love? What does it say about?
Well, Fergus goes through two phases of some kind of self-understanding. In the first thing, he looks at a British soldier and sees beyond that stereotype to the human being beyond that, and starts to understand something about himself. So having gone through
what?
Well, you know, something about humanity, something about the fact that you can't just say that person belongs to that caste, that race, and therefore I will hate him because of that. Yeah. He sees a guy that he grows to love rather than hate. So he goes through that process, and then that might have been, for a man from his background, the biggest possible jump for him to have made. And then he goes to London, and then gets involved with that woman, and then he's asked to go through an even bigger initiation. And the courage of the guy in doing that, I think, is what people are attracted to. One of the things that attract people to the movie is he behaves terribly well, and that people like to feel that they would behave well in that situation themselves.
Yeah, that's what part of it, isn't it? This notion of how somebody comes to grip with the most difficult problem in his life and how he behaves in dealing with it.
That's what it is for me. Yeah.
Yeah, he's the hero, isn't he? I mean, my character doesn't understand herself at all. No. She doesn't. She's lost, if she ever had any kind of real sense of identity. I think her identity is expressed in acting for the cause, and she's not supposed to have any emotions because she's a soldier. She does have emotions, and she tamps them down. She, I think, comes to despise Fergus in a way because he seems to be acting upon his emotions and to have lost sight.
She's given those away to the cause, and he, on the other hand...
But she hasn't. They're still there. It's just they're kind of under the surface, and in the end, she becomes kind of monstrous in a way because they have to come out somewhere, you know.
I don't know what clip we have here, but it's you playing Jude, Stephen playing Fergus, a terrorist, who have a relationship, and then, as I say, there's a hostage, and then you go back to London after an event, and then you follow him there because you escaped a catastrophe. Whatever scene we have, this is the relationship between the two of them. Roll tape, we'll take a look at this. The Crying Game, a movie everybody's talking about.
But you know what the thing is, Fergus?
No, what is the thing?
You vanished quite effectively. Became Mr. Nobody. You've no idea how useful that could be.
What do you mean?
We've got some plans here. And we'll need a Mr. Nobody to execute them.
No way, Jude. I'm out.
You're never out, Fergus. Maybe you don't care about yourself, but consider the girl, Fergus. The wee black chick.
Leave her out of this.
Jesus, Fergus, you're walking cliché. You know we won't leave her out of it. But I'm glad to see you care.
Part of what's at work here is this notion that this character is going through as he meets the love interest of a man that he has seen the death of. And it's had a profound impact on him. And the question, I guess, becomes, do you really ever know? Does anyone ever really know the person they're in love with?
Well, they never do. In my experience, anyway, they never do. But
was this a theme you wanted to explore?
Well, it's the greatest terror, isn't it? That's the thing that you're closest, the person you're closest to.
Yeah.
You know, that actually you don't ever know them, really. And I suppose that's what relationships, if they're about anything, they're about the fact that when you meet somebody that you think is delightful, beautiful, magnificent, and wonderful, you actually at some stage have to accommodate yourself to the reality of their lives, which very often is quite different, you know. In the case of this film, we take Fergus, who's an Irishman, a white Irishman, a gun-toting Irishman, a nationalist Irishman, yeah, and a man. Most important, probably. He has to lose his gun, he has to lose his nationality, his sense of nationality. He has to in some way kind of even lose his identity, his racial identity in some way. And in the end, he even has to lose his identity as a male. And you ask yourself, what is left after that, you know? And you're left with the most basic facts of humanity, really. That's what I think is what the movie is about.
Was that difficult, Stephen? I mean, when you say that, that sounds like the most complex range of emotions you have to deal with.
Yeah, I think it was difficult to do, yeah. I wouldn't pretend otherwise. It was a very
And the challenge was what? As an actor, I mean,
well,
it may be easier to do than talk about.
Sure. Well, it's just the technical challenge was to have those changes happen when really everyone else was around me was expressing emotion. Everyone else was shouting. Everyone else was begging to be spared, begging me to stay with them, begging me to leave them, and I was just in the centre, kind of reacting to that. And the difficulty was to make sure that the journey was still being registered in some way so that an audience could see that that was happening. Yeah. It wasn't hard to do in the sense that it was thrilling to do because it's a great part.
A hell of a story.
Yeah.
Is in some ways the second half of the film a mirror reflection of the first half of the film? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh God, I haven't thought about it like that before. I mean, sorry, Neil, I'm going to throw that back at you.
Everything that happens in the second half of the film, everything that happens in the first half happens in the second half, but in reversed form.
Right,
right. There's an encounter between two characters, almost like a seduction. I mean, Forrest Whitaker meets Stephen, or is met by Stephen, is trapped by Stephen in the first half of the film. His only way out is to somehow seduce him, both emotionally and sexually, you know. Right. And Forrest dies because Fergus's character, Stephen, doesn't actually make the leap of faith, that kind of leap of courage actually to enable him to survive.
But he does in the next time.
In the second half, he's given a second chance, which most of us actually would want in life. You know, he's given a second chance again. He meets someone, this time a woman, this time Forrest's lover, Dill. And again, he's confronted by a series of totally unexpected circumstances, and he's presented with a similar choice. And the triumph of the character of Fergus is that he actually does manage to love and does manage to enable Dill to survive. Yeah.
And the moral of all this is that we better
be a bit courageous about each other.
About each other and about our own instincts.
Yeah, and about the differences between us. We better get right across them, because so many things divide us nowadays. I mean, we live in a very confusing and divisive world.
Yeah. You are also on Broadway.
Sure.
Interesting juxtaposition, because in that case, someone to look over me.
Someone to watch.
Someone to watch.
Who'll watch over
someone to watch him. You play a captive.
Sure.
How is it different to play that kind of role for you, or is it just another assignment?
Well, in some ways, it's just another assignment. I mean, I'm very slow. I never really thought about the fact that I'm a captor in one and a captive in the other. I think in some ways Fergus is a captive, you know, because he's a captive of himself and his background. And it's a technical thing again, you know, the part is very different, demands very different things from me, you know, it's not... But the themes are similar. In Someone Who'll Watch Over Me, what happens is that an Irish man breaks down his stereotypical vision of an Englishman, and vice versa, and they come to some kind of accommodation, some kind of reconciliation at the end. So,
is part of the film's attractiveness to you not in terms of your performance or Miranda's performance or the performance of, was it Jay Davison? It plays or Forrest Whitaker, the sense that you don't see here IRA terrorists, if you may, as stereotypes. I mean, they're presented as interesting characters with a range of emotions, and you get a sense from Miranda's characterization of how one gets caught up in a cause that takes over their life. Did you obviously, because of your wife, went to prison? You clearly have identified yourself as a supporter of the IRA, correct?
No.
Okay, you haven't. But you understand what leads people to be caught up in this particular
I do. Cause. I mean, I've watched the last 20 years in the north of Ireland. I've watched how very decent people, well, people with a lot of principle, have got caught up. You know, particularly subsequent to the Bloody Sunday killings, when a lot of young people were thrown into the arms of violent organisations because they felt that they had no other recourse. So, I'm interested in that sense. I don't think it's central to the film. The political background's not actually the most central thing in it. But of course, the more that one deals with it in an adult way, rather than seeing the IRA as just blind psychopaths, the more chance there is for the political situation in the north of Ireland to be looked at properly and not just repressed.
Yeah. Did you write a letter, though, to Newsday or something? There was some question that came up about something you were unhappy with, something that you had been attributed as saying.
I think they just, I think someone reported me as saying things that I didn't feel I had said, because I discussed the situation and with some complexity, I thought, and that that was seen as being seen as favouring political positions that I didn't.
What you like best about the film as an actress, as one who loves films? What was it that was most appealing about the film itself for you?
Well, I think it's after the event, really, that the fact that as a member of the audience, I can sit through it time and again.
And be caught up in the emotion.
In the human dilemmas that are going on. I mean, and the fact that it asks you to drop any preconceptions at the door and not to label, and it's that's great.
Yeah.
I mean,
is it akin, in a sense, to Mona Lisa in any way? I mean, is there...
It's a little bit akin to Mona Lisa. It's more akin to the first movie that myself and Stephen made,
Angel.
which is called Angel, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. I mean, there's a racial issue in Mona Lisa, which is similar. But I suppose when I made Mona Lisa, I had been thinking of this story in a way, so maybe I put some things from this story into Mona Lisa without realizing it, you know.
Yeah. Let me just finally end about this, the whole twist thing. You are saying now, I mean, all the critics, essentially, no one has, with a couple of exceptions, and they warn you in the first couple of paragraphs, have talked about it. Are you surprised at that everybody's been able to act, I guess, in the audience's interest, even though I've suggested I'm not sure it would ruin the movie for someone.
I'm thrilled by it on two counts. First of all, the way movies are marketed now, because I've done some Hollywood movies, and I've seen how in the marketing and the advertising and the TV spots and everything like that, the movie is kind of shoved down the audience's throats. You know, so actually, many movies I see these days, it's redundant to go to the cinema because I feel I've been told about everything about the movies by the publicity anyway.
Right. Malcolm X is a good example of that.
Yeah, I haven't seen Malcolm X yet.
But it is true. I mean, it's a movie that some people are saying was oversold before the film arrived.
Yes, in a way. And actually, this film has been marketed terribly subtly, in a way. I mean, it could have been vulgarized, it could have been sensationalized. Exactly. That was my fear, and it hasn't been.
Yeah.
So I'm thrilled. I'm glad that people have not actually mentioned all the various twists that happen in this story. I'm also glad that audiences have been allowed to discover the film themselves, because it gives me faith in audiences. I mean, word of mouth has made this film work in a way that I could never have believed possible.
isn't that the most depressing thing that's going on today? And it's so cynical, the attitude of the business towards audiences, you know, that they don't allow them to make any, draw any conclusions for themselves, you know. It's pat, it's formula, it's that.
And this is what makes this film different.
Yeah, but the press, I mean, the press have respected
really
the audiences and respected the film. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's not there's a big gimmick or a big twist or anything like that. It's just a matter of actually the film and the audience have been respected.
What's intriguing about it for me is that it's just the way it deals with all of these, the characters and the dilemmas they're going through and the emotions they're feeling and the reality you said in the beginning. Thank you. Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. We'll be right back.